Okay, so this is going to be a recap of Bodyguard Season 1, Episode 2. So, David is dropping the kids off at school, and he found out that his son is being bullied. And he basically tells him, you need to stand up for yourself and don't cry, because, you don't want to show weakness and da-da-da-da. So, he's now at work. He's with Julia. They're on their way to her office, and his phone is ringing off the hook as Vicky, his ex-wife. And so he reluctantly answers the phone. He's very apologetic to Julia, but she eventually, because Vicky called so much, she was like, you may as well just go ahead and answer it before it drives us crazy, right, the ringing. So she finds out that, I don't know what his name, Charles did. I don't know if he got into a fight and hit the kid or whatever, but she said that the school called her to come in for a meeting. They were very upset, and they're trying to get Charlie into this special school. And they were not going to be able to do that. He's going to have to stay where he is for at least another year. And he's basically telling her, I can't talk right now. And he was like, after she told him they couldn't get into the school, it's going to be at least a year. And he was like, okay, you know what? We'll find out who we need to talk to and we'll deal with it. But I got to go. And so he basically ended up having to hang up on her. So they get to the office, and he opens the car door, and he's very apologetic. And she just walked by like the bitch she is. Just walked by. And so, he's posted up where he needs to be, and she's having a meeting. And so a man walks in, he has some kind of rank, and he was looking at her talking to another guy, and she was like, well, I thought the meeting was at 10:30 or something. He was like, oh, it's still on. That's something, just a private meeting she's having. And so we go into the office there, and it's basically, I don't know the guy's name or his position just yet, but he was giving her some intel that they had found out about a possible terrorist attack on schools. And I think they've narrowed it down to a couple of schools. And one of the schools happened to be the school that David's children attend. And so at this point, she basically instructed them to beef up security, but don't tell them why. And just to proceed, I guess they're going to figure out. But at this point, she has decided not to tell him. So, okay, so then she just heads on into the conference meeting that the guy was referencing earlier. Okay, so later on that night, he calls. He was able to return her call, and they couldn't talk long. He just wanted to say goodnight to the kids, and she just asked him not to say anything about the school because he was still upset about it. And he said their good nights, and it was all good. And he basically said that, I'll have time to go with you to talk to the headmaster and tomorrow. And she's like, well, what's the point? We've already done that. Okay, bitch, what's the point of you blowing his phone up if, I was kind of confused by that. Like, okay, he's offering something up. So if that's not what you wanted to do, then why didn't you come up with something else? So, okay, anyway. So she's basically like, we've already done that. And before he can say goodnight, she already hung up on him. So it's like, okay. So the next day, you could hear the radio communications going back and forth about this potential threat and how it's going to be carried out. And then you have the counterterrorism unit. This lady walks in. I have no idea what her name is or her position. It's like she's a person in charge. She's the one giving the orders, though. So she they already had guys en route. They already had a target, people that looked suspicious, so they were already following someone, and they followed them to a lot. They pulled into the lot in a car, like a little compact a little four-door car, and then they pulled out in like a white truck, and almost like it looks like a white, I don't know if it's like a U-Haul truck, but it was just all white. And so they was like, okay, that's the. So now they see how they're going to transport whatever this explosive is. So now they're, the people are peeling out, and they're driving behind the truck, and eventually they notice that they're being followed. So they started doing some evasive actions. The car, was able to keep up with them. They were able to communicate what was going on. And they tried to cut this car off. They tried to go around and kind of go in front of the truck. But I was like, okay, you're in a car, they're in a truck, so I'm not exactly sure what they thought they were going to do. Basically, their truck just peeled out and just tore the front end of that car off, that little car that they were in. They kept on barreling towards the school, because you can only go straight ahead was the school. There's you can go straight, and then there's you can one lane is going this way, one lane going that way. And so this truck is barreling towards the school, and then there's another unit that pulls up, but they have automatic weapons, and they just started shooting. The people at the school, they noticed that this truck was coming really fast, and so they started ushering and getting the kids in the school, in the building. And then this other cop car comes up, pulls up with these automatic weapons, started shooting, shot the damn car all the head, the truck all the hell. They kind of veered off and ran into the cars that are parked on the side of the road. Okay, so they didn't make it as far as the school, but they're still very close. So they start to move in with the automatic weapons. The police that were in the other car, they walk up, and now they're looking for maybe some means of detonating this device. They don't want to go and start opening doors and stuff, because they don't know if that's going to trigger the device. And so one of the cops, he walks around. One of the guys that actually dead, the guy in the passenger seat is dead, and he can see that the person in the driver's seat isn't. And so you can see the cop's eyes get really big, because he knows, he just knows what's about to happen. And as you know, the truck explodes, windows break. Luckily, all the children were inside, so they were uninjured. And so you can see that you saw like the sky view of this explosion. It was a pretty big explosion. So yeah, it's real out here in these streets. That was wow. Okay, so Julia is getting an update. She's in her office, and the guy walks in and gives her an update. The officers were injured, but there were no casualties on their side. But of course, the two terrorists in the truck, actually, because the truck blew up, they died. Obviously, none of the children were injured. They were able to get them all into school. And so they told her the school, and then she was like, oh, damn. So at this time, he's getting an update about what had happened. And so at this point, he still doesn't know that it was his children's school. So she was leaving for the day, and of course, he's, giving this update on their movements. And they're waiting for the elevator, and she basically said it's confidential, but the attack was at your children's school. None of the pupils were injured, but I think you should call your wife and children just to talk to them, make sure that they're all okay. And so he thanked her, and he went on with his day. Went on with his work. So he's back in, I guess what would be considered his headquarters, and he's talking to the woman who's saying that they put his family in protective custody, but the budget only stretches for one. So they chose to put his family in protective custody, which he was okay with. I mean, he expects to assume a certain level of risk to his own safety based on the kind of work that he does. So it just made sense. So the guy said earlier, when he was initially talking to Julia in the beginning, that when it came up, because she knew then that possibly it could be his child's school could be the target, but she didn't say anything at the time. And so the guy was like, the only way that this could happen is either the officers weren't communicating securely, or they found someone vulnerable to bribery and was able to get their intel that way. So at this point, it's still unclear as how they knew that his children descended to school. It's not even clear that he was the actual target. I mean, at this point, it could have been a coincidence, but based on what he does, they decided to take these precautions. So the lady was basically telling him that until they figure out what's going on, if they have a leak that's putting officers at risk, they're going to have to put him on desk duty, because him being out in the field put Julia at risk, it puts his family at risk, it puts him at risk, it puts other officers that are his colleagues at risk. So it's just easier for them to put him on desk duty while they do the investigation. And of course, he was not happy. He sees it as a punishment, but I mean, it only makes sense, seeing as how you don't really know the motive. You don't, like I said, they don't know at this point if he wasn't the intended target and it was just a coincidence, or if someone is really out to hurt him and his family. So, yeah. So David after the meeting, he heads to the safe house so he can sit down and talk with his ex-wife and the kids to find out, how they're doing and the whole thing. Now, was it smart for him to go there? I don't know, because if he was the target, then somebody could have been following him. But anywho, so he gets there and he says goodnight to the kids, and the ex-wife wants to talk to him. And they go off to the side, and basically they get into an argument. She was asking him about about the attacks and how they're all scared and how they had to evacuate the school. And he said that he was going to stay over. He said, oh, you think they might try again? He was like, I don't know. And so they ended up parting ways. And so at some point in the night, because he's been having trouble sleeping, as we just saw from the first episode, he keeps having, I guess, I don't know if people consider them flashbacks of his time in Iraq or something. He hears the, talking and gunfire and the whole thing. And so he got up, started walking around and walked to the window. And he stood there for a while. And he pulled the blinds up and he realized, okay, he's just, there was nothing there. He just saw the street. So after that, you see him sitting at the desk, supposedly doing some paperwork. I don't know if he was doing warrants or what he was doing, but you can clearly tell he was bored out of his damn mind. So he decides, oh, the hell with this, I'm going to go and have a drink. So he went to have a drink with his buddy from the meeting, the guy who leads the meeting. And the guy's still going on about how she's a bitch, how Julie, because she was giving a press conference about the attack. And, just basically, these politicians, they make these laws and they don't really take into account the actual people whose lives are affected by the decisions that they make. And so he's very upset. And he was like, I can't believe you work for them. He said, well, not anymore. And the guy's like, what do you mean? He said, well, my family's in protective custody. And he was like, I assume that risk based on what I do. But, my family's always been safe at home and been at home and safe and the whole thing. And so he just, he's just feeling some kind of way right now. He said, well, what if she felt it? He was like, what? What if she felt like all our pain, the frustration, and anger? And then Dave was kind of looking at him again like, are you going to try to do something? Like, oh, you were asking me, you expected me to do something to her or what? What do you, like, what was the point of that little tip? So he flashed to Julie. So she's in a meeting and she's getting an update from counterterrorism, the woman who was calling all the shots. And they basically was like, we're still trying to figure out the kind of bomb they used. Actually, we find out that 2 of the officers did die. And basically they're just trying to piece together what happened. And then Julie was like, so they keep on saying that they think it may be related to the October 1st attack, which is when he was on the train and he was able to avert that attack of the lady blowing up the train. So she said, so it could have been a failure in your office to determine if there was a second person on board that was involved, or you could have a leak in your office. And she was basically saying, you guys were hired to do this thing, but you're not, like, I'm not impressed with your work. How is it that you guys missed the fact that they purchased this van, that they rented this van or this truck, and like some things that she feels that they missed that they could have should have been able to catch. And she also said, and the one person who was able to stop this attack, you took off my detail. And so the lady looked at her like, that wasn't my call. Like that doesn't have anything to do with our department. And basically, one of the guys was like, okay, I think this is a police matter. But so he was siding with Julie in that regards, but he said we still need to communicate with the counterterrorism. So they're going to have to find a way to work together to figure out what the hell is going on. So she just wasn't, Julie got up and walked out. She's like, basically, I'm over it. I don't want to hear any more excuses and anything else. And the other lady, she sat at the table, and the guy she sat across from, she was like, you know what, fuck you. I guess because I don't know what she expected him. Like, he kind of threw her under the bus, I guess she felt. And so it was just, one of those meetings where, somebody has to be blamed. And I guess in a certain extent, that is your job. You're a counterterrorism. So the goal is that you stay one step ahead or, 5 steps ahead. But it seemed like they dropped the ball in a lot of different areas. So that's why Julie is upset. And she's upset. Oh, she might be missing David. I don't know. Okay, so Vicky gets they have someone go to the house, pick up the mail. I guess they go through the process of scanning it and the whole thing to make sure that it's all good. And so they brought them the mail to the safe house. And so they find out that school they wanted Charlie to go to, he got into. So that was one bit of good news. So the second bit is that he went to meet with his boss, and I guess Julia felt some kind of way and was able to pull whatever string she needed to pull to get him back on her detail. So he got the news that he's going to go back out into the field. So of course he was ecstatic about that. So we're back at the office. She's back at her office. Of course, David is posted up in his usual spot. And Stephen walks in to give her an update on the bombs. Because he has people working to determine the type of explosive it is. And he made some comment about, she was like, I knew you were the right person, right man, for the job. She made some comment, and then he stopped and he said, are there any recording devices in here? And she was like, I should be asking you. And he was basically like, this is a sensitive situation, and so we basically need to get our story straight. So I'm like, what the hell does that mean? Okay, so anywho, after the day, she went out to what she thought was going to be a meeting. Went to a restaurant, and when she got there, Rob was there, and he let her know that the other people weren't coming. And so basically, it was just a ruse so he can have dinner with her. And initially she wasn't offended or anything by it, but then eventually she was like, she feels uncomfortable, and so she got up and she left and asked if they could just pick something up on the way. So they did, and they sat, and her and Dave sat and talked while they ate. And she started asking him about his family and his wife, and she thought they were still married, but he said they were separated. She was like, oh, okay, I may have misunderstood or made some assumptions or whatever the case may be. And she asked about the kids. Oh, they're fine. And he made mention of the son getting into the school. And so she was like, oh, did he? And so he basically said, if you had anything to do with that, then, thank you. We really appreciate that. And so she was like, I got into politics to help people. So it's like she's, on one hand, it's like, God, you're such a bitch. On the other hand, okay, kind of halfway decent, I guess. So it's like, I mean, I guess it's an interesting character because you do at times you really just dislike her, just her behavior, and then and then she do things like that, and it's like, oh, okay, maybe she's not such a bad person after all. But because I want to know what this guy said. Well, you need to get our story straight. So I'm like, okay, is this gonna be like a 9/11 situation where people like, oh, it was an inside job? That's I guess we gotta keep watching to figure it out. But okay. Yes, it's the next day, I think, and Juliet meets with the Prime Minister and a bunch of other people. It was a closed-door meeting, so we don't know what was discussed. Okay, so after leaving there, I'm not sure where they were headed, but he asked her a question. He thought it was odd. He said, how did you know it was my kid's school? And she said, oh, I must have saw it in the report or something. He was like, I thought about it, and then he was like, well, I'm not trying to be argumentative, but that was a short amount of time for you to find out. And he was like, so she was like, I found out when I was, doing the favor, basically doing the favor for you, trying to get your kid into this school, and I found out the information that way. And so even that didn't even sit well with him, but he was kind of like, okay. And so the next thing you know, shots are being fired. And Terry is killed. Terry is was her driver. He gets killed. Blood sprays all over him because he's in the passenger seat, all over her because she's sitting directly behind the passenger seat. And she's panicked, and it looks like he was about to have some type of episode, like a flashback of being in the war. But he was going to get himself together, and the person was just firing on their car, and he called for backup, and they say, oh, be there in 2 minutes. That was the longest 2 minutes ever. I'm thinking, okay, so where are the people? Why it's backup? And it's supposed to be the high-ranking official, and it's taking so long for these people to get here. So still shots fired. So every time the shots were fired, she's on the floor. He told her to get on the floor because the doors and metal panels are bulletproof. But it looks like the windows were kind of bulletproof too. Like the only bullet we saw that actually went to the vehicle was the one that went in Terry's head. So I'm like, how's it looking, fuzzy? Like, okay. But he was telling her, trying to keep her calm. She was hyperventilating, obviously. And he was having her, but he was able to slide out of the car on the other side, get a glimpse of where the shots were coming from. So he ended up having to take poor Terry out and just leaving him on the ground. So because he had to get the car. So because he called him back up again, they said 2 minutes. He's like, you said 2 minutes 2 minutes ago. Like it had to have been like 10 minutes. And they're still waiting for this backup. So he jumps in the car and starts driving in reverse. They usually have a car following them, another security car following them. So for some reason, their car wasn't touched. It was only the car because the person she was the target. So he backs up. The car, a second car is following him. He pulls up. He sees where the building where the shoot starts coming from. He runs in. He's still covered in blood, looking half crazy. Put on this hat to signify he was a cop. He's trying to get to the roof. He gets to the roof and comes face to face with the damn shooter. It was his friend from the meeting that ran the meeting that was like, she needs to know what it feels like. And so when they made eye contact, you could have just bought him for a penny. He was just like, so the friend was standing there like, well, it's up to you now. He's like, what are you talking about? She has to be stopped. And then the friend ends up blowing his own brains out. So it's like, oh shit, so trauma. This man is yet again traumatized. His friend has shot himself. His brains are everywhere. Okay. So he heads home, and the gun that he has a personal weapon that he ends up hiding for reasons I'm not exactly sure. I'm assuming that you're allowed to have a personal weapon, but he hides it in the wall and goes through this whole elaborate thing to cover it up. Okay, so he receives a phone call. It's Julia. They have her obviously in protective custody. She's in some kind of safe house. So he goes to see about her, and she, basically asks the same question. Eventually, why did it take so long for him to get there? He's like, what do you mean? Where would that order come from? I mean, we were sitting there. I'm sitting there, we being fired on, and it took forever for these people to get here. What happened? He was like, basically, I don't know. That's above my pay grade. That call would have come from the head office. And then she stopped him and she said, Ann Sampson. And Sampson is the lady, finally figure out her name. Ann Sampson is the lady who over at counterintelligence. So she thinks now that she delayed the security, the police coming to get them out of that situation because she wanted her to be killed. This is what's going through her mind now, but she is drunk and she is traumatized and grief. Her driver got shot in front of her, blood and all. It was just a hot mess. So what do you think happens in that situation? He didn't cross the line and they end up bumping uglies. I'm like, I mean, I guess eventually we knew it was going to happen, but I didn't think it was going to happen this soon. I'm just like, oh, okay. Okay, David. Okay, so morning after, of course, he hurries out to get himself together, and she gives a press conference basically saying that she's, happy that there were no casualties and that it's going to make her all the more work harder to get RIPA 18 past this bill she's trying to get passed. And while she's getting a press conference in the corridor, you see Mike, who was the older guy when she was in the office in the beginning talking to Steven. He came in and said, oh, I thought the meeting was at 10 o'clock. That was Mike. So he's standing up there mumbling something. And next thing you know, he gets on the phone and he calls Ann Sampson, the lady who's over at counterintelligence. Okay, so David is requested to come in for a meeting with his boss. Ann Sampson is in the office, but the lady was like, oh, well, you outdid yourself again. I'm going to put you in for an accommodation and maybe a medal. And so he was very thankful. And then she started asking him about the amount of times that Julia meets with Steven. And he's like, well, I don't keep count. And so Ann basically said that I want to know why they've been having meetings that exclude me. And he's basically like, I'm not privy to that. And so she goes into this whole thing, like, I have it on good authority that she had prior knowledge of an attack on the school. And when your children's school name was mentioned, she didn't seem at all surprised. This is after they found out about the bomb. The bomb actually happened. So he's standing there like, and his boss is then saying, that's what they do. They do favors for you so you feel indebted to them, these are politicians. And so that you don't turn against them. And now they're feeling like, at first I was like, well, how do you know she did him a favor? And so basically they're trying to get him to spy on her and report back to them to find out what exactly they have going on. So a lot of people just don't trust this woman and her motives and what she has going on. And after that conversation she had with Steven about where Steven was like, I just want to make sure that we are basically on the same page and we get our story straight. I'm like, what is she talking about? So right now it's really making her look shady. So when she was talking to him, she was basically like, she had prior knowledge that your children's school was a target, and at any point in time we could have gotten them out of there, but she chose not to say anything. And so he's sitting there and his mind is going, so of course he's getting pissed off, but he'd already thought it was weird anyway. When they were in the car and he was asking her about, like, how did you know that was my children's school? So they end up head out for the day and go back to the safe house. He's in an adjoining room, and eventually he ends up going into her room, and they end up getting down again, and that's basically how the episode ends. So at this point, you don't know whether or not he's going to spy on her for them and start feeding them intelligence. We don't really know at this point. So it's like really up in the air, like, and they look kind of shady too, like and Sampson. I'm like, I ain't feeling you either. So it's interesting. We're gonna see how this all gonna play out. So okay, so I'm still liking the show. I mean, it's only 6 episodes, so we only have 4 left. So it's gonna be interesting how this all plays out. So I don't know if they're gonna throw us a curveball, because usually in situations like this, they do a very good job at painting the person to be this evil, horrible guy, and in the end, you see that it all kind of ties together into something that was for the greater good. Or if they're going to throw us a curveball and find out this really is a power-hungry, treacherous bitch. So I'm going to keep watching. So I'll talk to you guys in the next video.